Welcome to Kaumudy TV's Straight Line program. Today we have a very important personality from the United Nations. She is none other than Mrs. Kiran Mehra Kerpelman. She is the director of United Nations Information Center in New Delhi, and she is going to talk on the peace, development and human rights connected with the UN and also with India and her experience working with UN. Welcome, Mrs. Kerpelman.
Thank you very much.
So, how do you are working in India for the last 5 years, and how you see your mission?
I have to say that these 5 years have been absolutely amazing. You know, when I came here, I was a little bit apprehensive. I was coming back to my country of origin after a long time.
Maybe 30 years?
Yeah, a little more than that. I don't want to give away too much because then, you know, my age gets known. But anyway, I thought that having worked at headquarters for so long, it really was time. This was a great opportunity for me to come where the people are. And the United Nations strives to work for people. And this was a good way for me to finally connect with India. In fact, you know, we are called UNIC for short, and I interpret that as UN India Connect. So for me, coming here, being with the people, working with absolutely amazing, extraordinary people, you know, NGOs, academia, corporates, students, everybody striving for a better world.
And also media.
Media, definitely. That's our main bread and butter. The UNIC works very closely with media, and we look upon media as our friends.
And you have worked with the European media, maybe African, and also with the Indian media, India and Bhutan and the subcontinent. How do you compare the media people?
Oops. Well, I think it's very difficult to compare because in India, when I have been here with the UNIC, the relationship we have with the media has been a relationship that has been cultivated for many years, even before I came. So as I said to you earlier, we're really good friends. And I think that in India, the media is really hungry for news. They're hungry for trying to find out what is happening and what we can bring to the table for them. Sometimes that may not be the case elsewhere, but I think media in general, you know, we look at the one part of media that sensationalizes, but in general, I would say that media is looking for news.
And you have won several awards, especially in Gandhi Seva Award, the Ambassador for Peace. There are a lot of peace initiatives that are going on. But at the same time, we have a lot of violence, terrorist activities happening in the subcontinent and all over the world, especially with the Islamic State and all. How do you as a person and a UN representative see all these things?
Well, the first thing I'd like to mention here that, you know, when we use the word peace, peace is not just the absence of war. That is one thing, but peace is also a state of being, a state of being where people have their roti kapda makan, you know, they have food and they have shelter, they're able to educate their children, they're able to aspire to a life where they can in fact think of even a decent pension in their old age. They can think of good health for their family. So it's not just the absence of war. However, if we take your question in the sense of war, the United Nations is really big into UN peacekeeping, and India is one of the largest contributors to UN peacekeeping. And it's not just a question of peacekeeping. All these peacekeepers are actually going way beyond just peacekeeping in the sense of war. They are also peace building. They are there helping the populations of different countries. They're there giving them the confidence they required, or whether it's during elections and other things. So peace is something that is a pillar of the United Nations. So whatever we do, peace is actually cross-cutting. So whenever we start any new project, anything, we don't even have to sometimes put the word peace in there because it is just understood.
And also you work very actively with women in India and also abroad. So how do you see the situation of women in India?
Well, I have to say that the situation of women in India, if you look at it from the point of view of education, and there I have to talk about India and Bharat a little bit,
Yeah.
because I think that in the rural areas we still have a long way to go, and in fact when we talk about the Millennium Development Goals, we have a certain amount of, I would say, success in the literacy rates. However, there is a dropout rate which is very high. I think education for women is extremely important, and this should be from childhood. Why is it important? Because only education will pull people out of poverty, and to be pulled out of poverty is what is going to create the employment possibilities, that is going to create what we are looking at, the future we want, you know, the better world. So it's very important. However, we also have to look at issues such as violence against women. Unfortunately, we have to look at other opportunities for women, and I think there are lots of organizations within the country that are working very hard to do this, hand in hand with the UN.
You were speaking about poverty. Poverty is a major problem facing India and all third world countries. So how do you see the development? Because UN is very much concerned about development of rural areas, the rural people. So how do you see it in India and also in Bhutan? How do you compare it?
Well, in India we have 28 UN agencies working, and there are several specialized agencies. So for example, when we talk about development projects, the UN development program works hand in hand with the government of India in many of these rural areas to create projects. We have UNICEF working with children. We work very closely with the government in all these programs and projects, and in fact we think that projects and programs which are parallel in parallel to what the government of India would like for its people. So we try to work together on those, on achieving those targets. And I think beyond that, I would say we have Food and Agriculture Organization. We're looking very close at the nutritional aspects, the food for all. We have World Health Organization. You know, recently polio also was eradicated, and so each organization has its own mandate. Of course, there are certain things like for women, it really is cross-cutting again, because everybody, whether it's UN Women, whether it's UNDP, whichever organization, I think in whatever projects they undertake, it's the women's issue is always a priority.
And also earlier you were working with International Labour Organization of UN in Geneva, I think.
Yes, that's right.
So how do you see the labour policies around the world, especially in India? Usually there is a complaint that the labour laws are against the labourers or the poor people. Always the bosses get the advantage. So how the United Nations see the labour policies?
Well, every member state is a sovereign state. They have their policies, etc. But once, now for the United Nations is one thing, and then for the International Labour Organization that you mentioned, there are conventions, and once a convention is passed, it is the member states ratify it, and once they ratify it, they have to comply with it by law. The International Labour Office is slightly different, the organization, because it is tripartite. It's got governments, it's got trade unions, and it's got employers who have an equal voice. So I would say that they are working very hard in India. There are lots of different kinds of labor issues, whether we're talking about night work, whether we're talking about child labor, whether we're talking about women's work. I think that there has been a lot of progress made, but one big thing in India, which is has been something that they've been working on a lot, is the informal sector. You know, it is important that the informal sector be reviewed so that people have rights.
You mean the unorganized laborers?
The unorganized laborers, the unorganized sector, they also need to have rights, and that's what the UN organizations are pushing very hard for.
You are living in Geneva. Now you are, for the last 5 years you are in India, and you are a citizen of United States. And as I told you, you are a global citizen. How do you see the global situation now? There are positive things happening in the world, because people think that there are a lot of, as I said, terrorism, violence, and people are afraid. So how do you see all these things?
Okay, I think you said it. You know, I've always taken myself as a global citizen, and working with the United Nations for as long as I have, I think, in fact, when we join the United Nations, you forget your nationality. You're supposed to forget your nationality. So you decide that you are a global citizen, and you don't have the interests of any one state at heart. So we work really depending on whatever the subject is, whatever the issue is, for that. Now, how I see all these issues of fear you just said, you know, there's conflict everywhere. I think that the world has shrunk. In the old days, it wasn't that there weren't things happening, we just didn't hear about them, and the media helps a lot. You know, immediately something happens, we know that it's happening, and so we all feel concerned. One doesn't hear good news a lot, and I think that's also a question of balancing. There are lots of good things happening also. In fact, the United Nations is achieving lots of the targets that it brought out with the Millennium Development Goals. Globally, extreme poverty has been halved. You know, maternal child health in some parts of the world has improved. Whether it's food issues that have improved, we did not achieve the goals per se, but you know that now we have the Sustainable Development Goals that were accepted this year, and there are 17 goals as opposed to 8. There are 169 targets. It's very complete. These are the people's goals. The people actually wrote in. There was a survey, My World's survey, that was done over the last few years, and everyone who wrote in, whatever they wrote in was taken into account to come through eventually with these. So I think that if we all are able to, at communal level, community level, local level, national level, regional and beyond, if we all put in our efforts together with the governments, and people should really lend a hand in this, and there's a civil society, I think that we can make the world a better place.
And you said UNIC is UN India Connect.
That's the way I see it.
Yeah. So India has a new Prime Minister, Mr. Narendra Modi, and his team. And how's the connection with the Indian political setup, the Prime Minister and the Indian politicians?
Well, as far as the United Nations is concerned, Mr. Narendra Modi is a major friend of the United Nations. He was at the General Assembly in 2014, and he said how India and the UN should work hand in hand so that we can achieve some of the goals that we are after. And then again, in early 2015, we had the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon visit India again. And I say again because he was there a couple of years ago also, and he was here at the invitation of Prime Minister Modi, and he visited Gujarat, the vibrant Gujarat, and he visited the Sabarmati ashram. He's very fond of Gandhiji's sayings, etc. And also he visited some solar projects and other things. So in fact, he was here because Prime Minister Modi felt that we need to consolidate this relationship that he had started in 2014, and this is why I think that this was a win-win situation for us to work together even more.
You are speaking about UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon.
Yes.
And you are the representative of him in India.
Yeah, at the UNIC.
Yeah.